All right, I'd like to welcome you to the Aloha Insight System Setup webinar. Basically, some of the things we're going to be covering today is something called audit exceptions. Now, audit exceptions is not going to be in the general area where we're going to be spending most of our time today, but the audit exceptions are very prominent, particularly for admin type people. You could give it to your store managers as well, but we wanted to show you that here in case as an admin you wanted to use that. Then we'll get down into system setup, talk about setting up your company. And when we talk about setting up your company, each one of those bullet points is a tab that needs to be configured for your company. So the majority of this webinar, which lasts about an hour, is going to be in company setup. Once we get done with all those settings, then we'll move over into your store setup or your site setup, a little bit easier to do. From there, we'll go to users, setting up your users, anybody that's going to be using your Insight website. And then I finish off with security classes because that's really a powerful tool. Typically, if you're going to be configuring this, you're going to do basically your security classes before your users, because as you create users, those people need to be assigned a security class. But I save it for last here on the demo because of its power. All right, so that's kind of our layout for today. What I'm going to do here is just share my desktop with you. And as we come into the Insight website, basically over here on the left is where we're going to be spending most of our time. You can see I already have it open here with system setup, but I want to start up here in Aloha Insight, all right, because that's where the audit exception configurations rest. All right, so if we go in there, basically what you're going to see is that it will default. I've got a couple stores loaded in here, but it'll default to your company settings, which means as we do this, it's going to be for all your stores. But if you ever wanted to get it down to one store or a couple stores, all you have to do is hit your add button over here, and it presents you with a list of all the stores that you've loaded into Insight. And that's where I'll show you on site setup, down in company setup, how to get those in there. All right, so that's just a little primer there, just to show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select company settings because I want this for all my stores, and then I'm going to hit edit. All right, so as we go in and edit it, what you're going to see here is on the audit exception configuration, we give you little buttons on top here to select them all. So if you look at these and you say, hey, excuse me, I want to use just about all these, what I can do is select them all and then just unflag the ones that I don't want, or conversely, I could clear them all if I only want to use 2 or 3. All right, so that makes it real easy for you. When we get down into the major box here, what you're going to see is that it's divided in 2. On the left is audit exceptions. On the right is what we call relative audit exceptions. And really the basic difference between these two is your thresholds. All right, the thresholds on the left for your audit exception are in whole numbers. The thresholds for your relative audit exceptions are in percentages. All right, now I'll just stay over here on the left for the time being here, but a lot of line items here for you that you can use. And if you're familiar with your POS audit report, basically a lot of things here line up with that, like comp amounts and comp counts, and we can take the little scroll bar over here on the side and keep going down here. You'll see refund counts and void amounts and things like that. So what the purpose of this is you go through these line items, decide which ones you want to use, and then you put your threshold, whatever you want here, as a whole number. All right. Each of these is underlined, which means, hey, if I go to a cleared item amount or account, either one, and select on it, basically you'll get a nice little definition of what that line item is. So we kind of walk you through that. Now what happens is, if your threshold's ever violated, we can go into Report Viewer. I'll take you in there in just a minute and look at the audit report and see what was going on there. All right, so that's kind of the audit exception on the left. Now the relative is just a little bit different. As I mentioned before, you got percentages over here, but let's say we take something like the relative comp amount. Well, what would happen there is we get all the comps for that day of business, And then what it does, it compares a single employee to all the other employees working that same date of business. So in this case, I'd get the total amount of all my comps, divide my number of employees that worked that day into that to get an average number for each single employee. So let's say that average number was $20. All right. Now what I do is with my percent, I've got a 10% over there so that any individual that exceeds that $20 by 10% or more appears on that audit report. All right, so it's a great little tool, but once we get all these configured, basically the next step we go to is Report Viewer. So let's go over here to the side and look at Report Viewer, and you'll see in the categories here we have an audit category. And again, you'll see audit exceptions here. You can do it by employees or by managers, either one, but I'll just show you the audit employee example here. And if you look on this report, it gives you all the pertinent information. So you'll see your store, you'll see the audit type that you set up, you'll see the date it happened, the threshold that you established, the check number it occurred on, the employee that violated it, manager, if there was a manager involved, and then basically the time it happened, the value of the line item, and then the description of it. So it gives you a great little tracking tool there to use either as an admin, or if you wanted to give it to your store managers, you could do that as well. Now when you're here in Report Viewer, down at the bottom we got a little link here which kind of goes into audit exceptions a little bit more. So if it kind of piques your interest, you can click on that and read up a little bit more about it. All right, but we did want to include that with the system admin type thing, the company setup, because it is such a powerful tool. All right, now let's go down here. Let's just go to system setup then and start off with our company setup. So as we go into company setup, you'll see the tabs across the top. That lines up with those little bullet points we saw on the PowerPoint. And now on our first screen here, what you're going to see is that basically, if I get all the way over here, basically you'll see a company ID number up here in the upper right. All right, and what that company ID is, it's usually 3 letters and 2 numbers like you see here, but every individual client that we have has their own. All right, it's different for everybody, and that comes into play as we talk about the configuration over here, especially on the company email address. All right, but let's start here at the top. Here's your company name. It's probably already in there for you, but if you need to change it, that's a user-defined field, so you can put anything in there you want. It just won't change your URL that you log into your website with. That remains the same. So if we go up above here, you'll see we're on the demo site, so it's demo.alohaenterprise.com. But my company name is Insight Demo instead of demo whatever. All right, so you can change that out, but you'll still log in with the same URL regardless of what's in here. Next is your domain, and it's the same for everybody. So it's alohaenterprise.com. You can't get in there. It's grayed out, so that's basically something that everybody's going to be the same on. Now, that company email address, again, it takes your company ID that we looked at over on the right there and just puts at alohaenterprise.com. Now, this is an important email address because we communicate with that for any issues, whether that be an installation issue or a polling issue or anything like that. What we highly recommend is you don't change this out. So if you're going to be the admin of the site, you obviously want to be in the loop on those things. But rather than putting your email address in here, what we want you to do is contact our support team, and what they'll do is you just give them those 2 email addresses. They'll link them together so that now your email that you use on your iPhone or your Android or wherever, basically you're in the loop now. Anything that we're communicating as far as issues, you'll be in the loop on. But we ask you to leave this one in there. Next is the default language. So we can change out languages. We've got a few here, and more will be added later, but you can see with Spanish and German and Portuguese on down the line there. What this does company-wide is set it so the people that log into the website see this language. All right, so here in Texas, obviously we're on the Mexican border. And so let's say I've got all my stores here in Texas, but I have 2 down in Mexico City. All right, so I can leave this in English because that's the majority of my stores, and my store managers speak English. All right, but when it comes to my Hispanic managers down in Mexico City, this is one of the lines here in company setup, and there's several of them, but this gets overridden by the user setup. So I can go, when I create my Hispanic managers in the user setup, I can set theirs at Spanish, so when they log into the website, they see it in Spanish. All right, so that's just a little tool here that determines the website language, and you want to get the prevalent one here, and then on the users you can change that out. Now we have something called active reports. When you're in Report Viewer, back here it's the same thing. You determine the default language for those. All right, so if we take this drop down, you're going to see that it really, the only thing that we have now is English. We haven't transposed those into other languages. All right, but you can format it in different languages, same ones that we saw earlier. So I can format data elements there. I could suppress currency symbols if I want to do that. So any currency symbols that show up in headers or any other data elements of the report would not show the currency symbol if I suppress it. And then one of the nice features of active reports is you can put logos on those reports, dress them up a little bit. All right. Here in company setup, you load those in. All right. So you can see there's a browse button here. You just go browse to where your logos are and then upload those files. And what happens now on the drop down, as many as you want, up to 20 you can put in there, but every one that you upload will show here in the drop down list. Now what this box is for, the logo here in company setup, is this is the default that will automatically show when they go into Report Viewer. Now when they do that, they obviously can take a drop down there in Report Viewer and pick any of the other logos you give them to use. So they can switch it out when they get in Report Viewer, but this line is the default. It always defaults to this automatically. So if they didn't pay any attention to it or they wanted to keep it, they don't have to do anything there. It'll automatically show our Aloha logo. All right. Over here is store value configuration. So that's a separate webinar. We do offer a store value webinar with a lot of good information in it. So if you ever think you may want to do that add-on to Insight, you can take that webinar and they'll take you in there. Next is your company calendar. All right, now for most people, the start date and the last payroll end date don't come into play unless you're using payroll integration, which is another tool you can use with Insight. So if you're using payroll integration, you'll use start date and last payroll end date. If you're not, the only two you have to be concerned about are weekday start. All right, so the weekday start basically says, hey, what day do we start on? Now, if you're using payroll integration, you'll have to adjust this according to your last payroll end date. All right, so but typically, you know, this is all over the map for most people. Some have different starts of the day, but make sure you get this one right, because if you do anything with weekday starts like company week or anything like that, and this day is wrong, all your company week or last company week, all that type reports are going to be wrong, and you don't want that. So make sure you get that one right. Same with your pay period. So if bi-weekly, monthly, weekly, whatever you do, make sure you get it right, because if I'm paying bi-weekly but I leave this on monthly, my human resource people are going to come down the hallway looking for me and hang me up by my neck. All right, so you don't want those reports to be wrong, so make sure you get that one right as well. Now within Insight, we do fiscal time periods. So you can do a fiscal week or a fiscal year. And basically here you come into your fiscal periods, and basically what this will do, it always keep track of the current year, the first day of the year and the last day of the year. And all you have to do is tell how many fiscal periods you do in that year. So a lot of people are 12. So if we leave it at 12, we come down below here. We got to drag this down a little bit to show you. Whoop, didn't get it quite where I wanted there. There we go. And all we do is hit the little calculate button. And when I calculate it, you'll see that we've got 12 periods here, and they're pretty pristine because they all start on the first of the month. All right, so we got 12 periods. Now, this is a user-defined field over here as well, so you don't have to call them periods. You can call them anything you want. But we have a few people who are on 13 fiscal periods. So if I change that, again, I got to pull down here. I meant to do my resolution to make it a little bit easier for you here and forgot to do that. But if we go down here now and recalculate, you're going to see that we do have 13 periods now, and not so pristine on the dates. They're all over the map now as far as the day of the month. All right, so make sure you do this. Anything that you do for fiscal reporting or anything else, make sure you come in here and take care of that fiscal periods. If you ever want to do quarters, we can handle that as well. If you come in here, all you have to do is click the little icon over there at the end, and you'll see that you can designate your fiscal periods when those begin, or your fiscal quarters, I should say. All right, so those are fiscal. If you ever need to do any reporting on fiscals, you want to configure those. Over here on company close days, what we ask is that as you come into these close days, if you're not closed any day of the week, you can leave them all unflagged, all right, because that's how they default. But if you are closed, like for instance, Chick-fil-A closes on Sundays, if you would come in here and flag and let us know that, because that helps us help you out. Because what happens, let's say we start with Insight on Friday, we're cooking along, we're polling, everything's going great Friday, Saturday. All of a sudden we get to Sunday and we don't get polling results, and we get really concerned about that unless this is flagged. It lets Insight know, hey, we didn't get any polling information, but that's okay because they're closed on Sunday. All right. If you're closed on Sunday and you don't flag it, we're expecting that information, and we get a little upset about that and give you a call and try and figure out what's going on there. So if you would please flag that if you're closed any day of the week. Over here, just some important times for Insight to know. Your open hour, your close hour, your end of day hour. Run store edit's not currently used, but these help us basically keep track of things. And if you got open hours, let's say I got stores all over the United States and they're opening at different times based on time zones, what you can do is just gear that towards your corporate location. So if my corporation is located in the central region, what I can do is keep track of those other time zones according to the central time and put the earliest here, the earliest open hour, the earliest close hour, and the earliest end of day. Down below is a default time zone. So again, going back to Report Viewer, those people that pull up a report in Report Viewer can put a time zone on it. So this in company setup is the default one they see. So it's like the other default we saw on the other thing. It's just a default that when they get to Report Viewer, it'll default to Central. They can always take the drop down, particularly if I got stores all over the world, and they can put whatever Windows functionality there for, Central Brazilian or U.S. Eastern Standard Time or whatever it may be. All right, as we move over to the polling and system administration, basically you define the minimum password length that your people use to log into Insight. So we got 7 here. You may figure that's too many or that's not enough. So you can adjust that however you want. Same way with remembering their last password. How many do you want to remember? We can go as low as 4 and up to 12. All right. But if we put 4 in here, that means they have to have 5 different passwords before they can start using the first one over again. Now, the website homepage determines what people see when they log in, all right? So usually it's the portal. So we got a lot of stuff in here, but let me take these guys out so I can show you. So basically, everybody that logs in for my company is going to see the portal view, which is the one we came into here, all right? Now, you can change that out because with the drop down here, you're going to see that lines up with the headers over there on the left, Aloha Insight, Aloha Loyalty, all the way down. All right. And if I want to go into Aloha Insight and I wanted everybody to see alert setup, all I do is select it. I click add, and now I can take the portal and remove it. And now when everybody logged in, they'd see alert setup. All right. So again, this is one of those that when we get to the user can override this. So I can say, hey, I want most of my people to see the portal, but that one manager is just coming in to look at reports and set up alerts. So what I can do is have him on his user, and you'll see that when we get there, I can set that for alert setup. So when he logs in, he doesn't see the portal, he sees alert setup. Down below here, you're going to see options that you have to not import Social Security numbers from the Aloha POS system when it pulls your store. Just for security, you may want to flag that. Current day polling, basically by default when you get Insight, it's going to pull on yesterday's date of business. But if you call support, you can ask them to do polling on today's business. That's called current day polling. Now, to set that up, you have to call support. This does not do it. It doesn't turn it on or do anything else. It just lets you know as an admin when you're in company setup that yes, we are using current day polling. And then for an administrator, basically we would like for you to put your name in here. When you come in here, it's, I forget what we by default put, support or something in there, but this will drop down and give you all your users that you've loaded into Insight. And again, we'll talk about how to add users here in just a while. All right, but you just go down, pick your name if you're going to be the admin, and now we've got that little system admin box all filled in. Okay, again, over on the right, again, store value, ACH stands for automatic clearinghouse, but if you decide you want to use store value, they'll talk about the configuration over here as well. Now, from a sales reporting module here for your company, for your PMix report, your product mix report, you determine whether you want to use the short name, the chit name, or the long name from the POS system. So it's your call as to what you use for your PMix. Then options to list your modifiers with your items sold on that PMix. Do you want to exclude zero priced items and modifiers? Or do you want to exclude void items? Down below, if you're blessed enough to have your stores all identical, same items, same ID numbers, you can use a consolidated PMix, but most of us are going to use a separate PMix per store. And then we have something called the drill down viewer. So if you've attended the intro webinar, we get into the drill down viewers, but you determine here on company setup which categories it pulls from. So with Insight, we pull in both your non-sales and your sales categories. Or if you're using Config Center, you'll see it's a general category, but those are non-sales. And what happens here is now you determine whether it's just sales categories that go in there, or you can select your categories. So you just change that box, hit select, and now all your categories are pulled in here, and you pick which ones you want to use just by moving them over to the right-hand side with the arrows here. The other little box there, because the drill down viewer is so critical and so dynamic, it can get down to check level. So if you wanted to consolidate by check numbers, you can certainly do that as well. Over on the right, again, just some defaults when they go into report viewer. So right now we still have one or two Crystal report engine type reports. Here you determine how those come off as defaults when those people go to report viewer. So it's saying, hey, if it's going to be using a Crystal report engine, it's going to come off as Excel. But if you want to use Crystal, you can do that, but comma separated, character separated, Excel, Word, tab separated, all those are choices. And again, it's just a default. So when people go into report viewer, they have the option of pulling it down. So now it's on Excel, but maybe, I've got somebody who wants to see that report in Word. So they can, in report viewer, they can drop down and pick Word, but they'll start off with Excel. And same way with those active reports. PDFs is the major reason why we went to the active reports. A lot of people like PDFs for their reporting. And so you can do it as PDF, or I can go to Excel here. If I'm an accountant, back in Report Viewer again, I can change that out and fire it in Excel or rich text format. All right, but again, these are defaults. Now, reporting options, you may not want to flag these on company setup. We're on a demo site and everybody's flagging things here. But the first one says, I automatically display these reports in the report viewer. All right. So maybe you don't want that. There's certain things that you may not want if you're working on company stuff to automatically do things. The other one is to automatically display reports on the portal. Well, the first one, displaying in the report viewer, means as soon as that report generates, it pops up on your screen. And if you're typically using confidential reports or something, you may not necessarily want that. All right. The other one automatically puts the reports here on the portal, but you may not want to do that, send all reports out here. You just want certain ones out here that are really important to you. All right. So gross sales or my item report, general ledger report, things that are critical to you, you want to come out here. But that little flag back here, in company setup would automatically display it on the portal after it processes. So you can leave these unflagged here. And again, these two are on the user setup. So if somebody wanted those, you could flag it on their user setup. Because we get down to check detail, you determine whether we display the original item price or display discounted item prices. All right. And then you'll see another add-ons that we do here. General Ledger is its own separate webinar. So if you want to talk about the General Ledger and how it connects to Insight, we do webinars on that. Or that payroll integration I talked about earlier. That's another setting for it. All right, now as we move over to our sales calculations, basically nice little flag just to try to get your guest counts to a more accurate level. But it's possible in the POS to set a 0 guest count on a check. All right, if that happens and we pull that information into Insight, you can at least flag that if you want to get that count up to at least 1. So we know guest counts are impossible to hit dead on, but Insight will help you at least account for at least 1 guest on that check. Do we exclude hours from our $0 employees or exclude hours from our unscheduled employees? So for managers, do we want to exclude them from anything that we go on with reports on labor? And then this guy currently not being used, you can flag it or not flag it, but that's auto create records for unassigned shifts. Again, how do you want to show your overtime pay? All right, do you want to show it as time and a half? If so, you can flag that. All right, now I'm going to move over here to the right because this is kind of their own section across here down below. So let's go to the upper right here. And you'll see your check average method, your call on what you use to determine your check average method. You can use gross sales, you can use net sales, or you could use straight sales. Now, straight sales for Insight is just your item sales, nothing else. All right, so that's your choice for your check average method. Here's your per person average method, same choices, gross, net, or straight, and whatever you want to use for there. Elapsed time method. So we do have speed of service reports you can use in Insight. And here we give you about every choice you could have for what is the check time. Is it first ordered to close time, or last ordered to last payment, or open time to last payment, or whatever you want there for that type of time chunk you want to put there. Tip threshold. Again, with the payroll integration, they use this figure, all right, to determine partial sales reporting. You determine what percent you want to report through the payroll integration program. So that's another field for them. Now, your speed of service, min-max minutes. We have several speed of service reports. All right, we have one that's just a typical speed of service. We've got one that's a speed of service with turn times. And then the third one is speed of service with turn time weekly values. And that's specifically what this area is for. And so if you're going to use the speed of service turn time weekly report, what we do here is give you a choice to put in minimum and maximum minutes. So if I do this like it's here, 5 minutes is my minimum, 45 is my maximum. What happens is the system discounts check times outside those limits. All right, so if I'm doing a speed of service and it's 5 minutes, that's an unrealistic figure, particularly for table service, maybe okay for quick. But now it throws out those figures so it doesn't skew my speed of service numbers. Okay, likewise on the other end, they should have that out to them in 45 minutes if that's my number. And again, anything over that does not reflect in the report. We just throw out the check times on those extremes so that we get a more accurate picture of how good our speed of service is. Okay, down below, on your net sales, you've got all kinds of choices here. You know, I can include all my promos or exclude them, or likewise include all my comps or exclude them, or I can select the promos or comps, but when I select them, I'm selecting the ones that I want to exclude. All right, so if I change this, you'll see that it tells right on top when we select those that we're selecting the ones to be excluded. All right, the best way to think about that is it's below the excluded button, and all we're doing is it allows us not to exclude all of them, but just to exclude some of them if we want to do that. Some other choices for your net sales is we could exclude surcharges. We could, over here on the right, exclude your order mode charges, so things like delivery or to-go fees, those type things. We do have a training job code on the POS side of it, and when that gets pulled into Insight, you determine how that operates. Do we exclude sales from that employee? That's what the POS does anyway. The POS excludes it as well, but do we want to exclude it here and when it gets into Insight? Do we exclude their hours? Okay, for any kind of labor report, do we want to exclude those because they're in training? Or on the right here, do we exclude tips if they get them? So it's your call on how you want to do that. Last one at the bottom here is comparable stores. So what this figure does, it allows you to give a little grace to brand new stores. All right, so if my stores are averaging, let's say, $3,000 profit a day, and I got a brand new store and they've only doing, $600 a day. Well, we give them a little grace here because it says the age for comparable stores. We give them a little grace there, 12 months or a year and a half or whatever you want to give them, so that those numbers aren't really held against them until they get up and running. All right, so that's our sales calculation. Now, the data management tab could be one of your most important because it's a concept of your master store. All right, so we see here the master store here is Fort Worth North Side. And so what happens at your master store, if I go to one of my other stores, see what other ones we got here. Okay, if I go to my Las Vegas MGM store and I create a category at that store, it's not going to matter to Insight. It's not going to bring it in unless that category is also at my master store. All right, so I got to put it at my Fort Worth Northside store in order to do that. Now, when we talk about the categories, you'll see that by default, we put the radio button up here at the top where it retrieves category information from your stores. That means Insight does the work for you. It'll automatically retrieve that. You tell it whether I want to get all the category information, both sales and non-sales, or whether I just only want to get sales categories. So that's all you have to tell it. Insight does all the rest. But if you want to take control, you switch out the radio button. Now it says all categories will be specified through the category wizard. So now it's in your hands. So the first thing you need to do is create a default item category. All right, and you see there miscellaneous would be a great one. Because what happens now is, as we're pulling items in from stores, let's say we added a new wine. That item gets pulled in, comes in, and now what Insight does, it says, okay, I see that they're going to control this themselves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that new wine in that miscellaneous category. And then it's up to you under our company setup where we are currently, you're going to see that we have category setup. And what you would have to do is go into category setup, move that wine from the miscellaneous category to your wine category. So it's just whether you want to take control or let Insight do the work for you. And if I'm paying for Insight, I'm going to let it do the work. But that's what that's all about. All right. So that's your company setup. Basically, 6 tabs that need to be configured, a lot of goodies there. And now let's move over then to our store setup. All right, so if we come down to site setup, you're going to see it's a little bit easier, obviously, than company setup. But you've got choices here in Insight. It doesn't have to be stores. You could create store groups. You can create areas. You can create regions. Or if you're using loyalty or store value cards, you can set up replication groups. All right, so we're going to just today stick on stores. And this is how you would come in and add any store or modify any store in the Insight. So we just click Next. Now, if you haven't added stores, basically this whole area will be blank. And what you'll have to do is come over here and click the Add button to add your store. Now, if I do that, everything's going to be blank. So I'm just going to pick a store here. Let's try our Grapevine Downtown store. But again, here on this screen, once you build it out, you'll see the ID number for that store. You'll see the polling dates for that store. And then you can get into report settings and doing editing, things like that. You'll see I can copy it. I can delete it from here. So different things that I can do as far as that store is concerned. All right, so I'm going to just double click is what you do here. And now we're in our Grapevine store setup. So when we create our store, you'll see it only has 3 tabs. And really, if you're not going to deal with general ledger or payroll integration, the only one you really need is this one. You only need the 1 tab if that's all you want to do. All right. But if we look here on the left-hand side, all the information you would know about your store, the ID, the name, the open date, the phone number, the addresses, things like that. What we do down below here, if you've created regions and areas, we allow you, as you create a new store, to drop those right into the right region or area and not have to go back to regions or areas to load the store in. So you can do it right as you configure the store. Over on the right-hand side, not the best one to show you because all these are flagged, but when this store is installed, you'll have a flag here by Aloha Insight, and you'll see when it was installed. The other ones, don't flag these arbitrarily and put an install date in there until you're sure you want them, all right? Because these are add-ons that charge monthly fees for these, all right? So if you're really interested in doing them, they're great add-ons, but if you are interested in doing that, you want to do a little research first. You can take the webinars, you can read up on them from the help files and things like that. To find out if you really want them, and then if you do, you can go ahead and flag it and then put an installation date there that you want to get it installed. And our installation team would like 2 weeks lead time on that if you decide you're going to do that. Some other information is your POS software key at this store. All right, now obviously somebody just put a 1 in there, but typically they're 5 digits. All right. And it's not the 6 lines of SEC code, it's the serial number on the key. So you could have that readily at your fingertips if you put that in here and know that this store uses this POS security key. And same way with your Pulse store settings. Get in here and allow Pulse to do its job as well. Let's go back here. Basically, as we come in now and put the Pulse ID in here. So if you're using Pulse, and again, store close days down at the bottom here. What you're going to see is that store close days is here as well as in company setup, but it's here in case the store is different. So back in company setup, we said, hey, we're closed on Sundays. Maybe this store is open on Sunday but closed on Mondays. So what we can do is tell the system that, yes, we're pulling Sunday and we're only getting our whatever store I chose here, the Grapevine store. We're only getting information for that, and that's fine because the company says they're closed on Sundays, but here the store is open. And likewise on Monday, when we don't get polling information from the Grapevine store, we know that's fine because you took the time to flag that for us. All right. Now, if you want, that's the only thing you need to configure on your store setup. All right. If we look at some of these other tabs, let me go back up top here so we can show you those. Here's your polling configuration. All right. So here's a poll end date. We ask you not to touch that. That's for our support team to maneuver. All right. But you can leave yourself information as an admin on your store if you want to do it. It's optional. You can just leave this blank and not worry about it. But otherwise, if they're using 10-digit dialing, or they use a 9 to get an outside line, are they using high-speed internet, or are they using dial-up? If they're dial-up, you can leave all that information with even a phone number if you need support for that or whatever. All right. So it's optional, and then down below is a secondary one. But your option whether you use it or not. And then advanced settings, again, comes in with general ledger and your payroll information over here. All right, so really you see the store is pretty easy to set up with just one major tab to configure. Now I'm going to jump to users. All right, again, a little bit out of sync because typically we do security classes, but these are so critical I'm saving them for last. But here's your users. Very similar to your stores in that it'll be a blank box if you haven't put your users in yet, and then you come over here and click the add button to add your new users. All right. Now as we build our users out, you'll see their name, you'll see the security class that you gave them, whether they're active or not, and really that's a nice little feature here. If we go down, basically what you're going to see is if you flag them as inactive, they'll disappear off this list. All right. And then what you can do, let's see, they've got it so I can't show you, but down below there's an inactive flag. And what that would do is move them from your active to your inactive sheet. And if you ever wanted to bring back your inactive employees, you can flag that inactive flag and they'll become active again. So it kind of separates your active from your inactive people. The locked is if they lock themselves out of the website. All right, so let's say Alan here used the wrong password, whatever many times we said he was going to do before he got locked out. Now what that'll do, it'll put a check mark here, and Alan won't be able to log in until you as the admin come in here and unflag him. All right. Or if you lock yourself out as an admin, you'd have to call our support team and they'd have to log in and get you back in. All right. But again, on any employee, we can edit them. We can copy them. We can delete them. All right. So let's just edit Alan here. Let's go in here and click the edit tab and see what he's all about. I could do a new one, but it'd all be blank. But now you'll see a place for an email address, so we can put their email address here. Okay, just security class. This is where we attach the security class, and little pencil takes you to security classes. Here's that language I talked about. So if this was my Hispanic manager, I'm going to switch that out to Spanish for this individual, where everybody else is going to see English. Here's the crystal report format. So maybe it's an accountant. They want to see it in Excel by default. Here's the active report. Well, PDF, but if it's an accountant, they like to see it in Excel. Here's my active report language. Okay, remember we don't have anything but English there, so we can't change that, but my active report formatting for that can be anything. So if it's my Hispanic managers, I'm going to put Spanish there. We didn't suppress the currency symbol on company setup, but here this individual wants to do that. And again, I unflagged these on company setup, but this individual wants to see the reports pop right up, and he wants to put everything on the portal, so we can accommodate that. Here's the website. All right, so again, if this was my manager who only creates alerts, remember I can go here and pick any of these line items over here, whether it's online or store value or loyalty. Any of these line items are available to load in here as a page that this individual sees when they first log in. All right, Pulse access, basically, let me go back to company setup here for a minute. It looks like they took my tab away. They did. We used to do that here on user setup if you're going to be using Pulse. But what happened here is if 50 people in my organization are using Pulse, I'd have to go into the users one at a time to flag it. So what we did, now I don't see it on the new interface, but I'm sure they must have forgot about that, is that one of these tabs in company setup was Pulse tab that would allow me to select all 50 employees and move them over to the right hand side and do it all one at a time. Instead of doing them one at a time, do it all at once. All right, and I don't know what happened to that. I'll have to check with them to see. But that's exactly what this was. You know, instead of flagging them individually in company setup, we could have done it all at one time. Now, as we get over here on the right hand side, here's the name that they're going to log in with. Here's their password, so we put a password and confirm that password. And again, these are encrypted, so we don't even know what they are. If you called support looking for your password, we wouldn't be able to tell you. What we'd have to do is change it to something easy and let you log in with it, and then you'd have to come into your user setup and change it to what you wanted it to be. Now, some nice features here. I can log in by start date or end date. I can put dates on here. So let's say I've got a manager coming into my store in the month of February, and he's only going to be there for the month of February. What I can do is put a start date, February 1st, and an end date, February 28th, or 20, I don't know if it's 28 or 29 this year, but we can put those dates in there. And now that manager, he's got a time segment here that he's only allowed to get into the website for the month of February. All right, we have a webmail address here. So instead of putting a email address over here, if they're using a webmail like Gmail or Hotmail or one of those, you can put that address here. And then we automatically, you can see this is grayed out now, but on a brand new employee, this is flagged. And what it does, it sends them a getting started guide before they even hit the website. And that getting started guide does a lot of cool things. It tells them what a data center is, talks a little bit about the reports, how to log into the website, just some great information that they can read about before they even get to the website. Now, some really important settings here. If this is one of my store managers, I want to make sure I put him in his home store. All right, so if Alan here is working in my Kansas City store, I want to make sure that I put him in that store. All right, this in conjunction with his security class does some wonderful things that I'll tell you about. All right, same way with your region managers or your area managers. So if this is an area manager, I want to put him in his home area. Maybe it's the West. Okay, now the multi-factor authentication isn't being used anymore. That we used to have the RSA serial number here you could put in, but we use that for command center. That's not being used anymore. Everything is text messages now. So these are all grayed out. You won't be able to do anything there. All right, but that is the user. It's just the one tab. It doesn't even have additional tabs like your store did. But that basically allows you to set up every user that's going to be using Insight. All right, now I'm going to just back out here. I'm not going to save that because Alan had come looking for me. And then basically the last area I want to go into here is your security class setup. So let's go back down here to system setup. We'll go to security class setup. And again, a blank box. When you first come in, you'll have to add them. Okay, any existing one you can edit, delete, or copy. All right. And what I'm going to do, I don't want to show you all blank boxes here, so we'll come down here to our limited access or demo access. Let's do demo. We're going to edit it. And now you're going to see basically you give your security class a good name. So if this is going to be for all my store managers, I'm going to put store managers in there or regional managers or whatever. Now we saw on the user that he's only allowed in my store for the month of February. On his security class, maybe he's only going to be here for lunch hour. All right. So what I can do now is put a start time of 11 and an end time of 3 o'clock, and it's military time, so 1500. All right. And now what happens is he's limited not only by the day, but on the time of the day. All right. So I can really narrow that down. Now, if I put it at 3 o'clock and he's still working on it, he goes to 3:05, it's not going to kick him out. But when he's done and he tries to log out and logs back in at 3:06, he's not able to do it. All right, we get down to change your password every so many days. Now, Insight's kind of lenient here. It gives you 6 numbers you can put in here if you want to do it, where Config Center is only 90 days max. Lock out users after how many attempts? So that, remember, puts a little flag in the lockbox. If they don't get a correct password in 5 tries, it's going to put that little flag in the lockbox. Do we want to force difficult passwords? So uppercase, lowercase, numbers. If so, you want to flag that. Now, these 3, they're flagged here, but this isn't something that you want to give to just anybody. All right, these are more for admin people, because what this says is if Insight does new reports, new security rights, new applications, and you see on the right there, you'll see those. We'll explain those here in just a minute. But as Insight releases new ones of those, this security class automatically gets those. And you don't want your store managers automatically getting security rights and applications or even reports. Okay. So for admin type people, you want to flag those. Otherwise, don't flag them. Then now, if we go into the regions, areas, store groups, but let's go into stores. If I go into stores allowed, basically, if I'm going to do my store manager, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and say allow access to his home store only. So back on Alan, what that does, it locks him into that Grapevine store only, that he can only see information for that store. All right. So now what it does, as a corporate individual, if I want to send a report to all stores, I can do it. But Alan in Grapevine, when he gets that report, he only sees Grapevine's information. He doesn't see anybody else's. So that's pretty dynamic. All right. Or we can allow to selected stores, because we had to do that for the regions and the area managers. We don't want them looking at any other region. We just want them to see the stores in their region. All right. So you can do that with, again, regions, areas, everything here. Now, the last 3 reports, you'll see that this little demo access security class has 743 reports that they've given them. All right. But when you come into reports, by default on a new system, every report is on the left, which means that they don't have access to it. What you do is you go by categories, so it's like Report Viewer, where you got the different categories with all the report line items in it. You bring and pick and choose which reports you want to give them from all these. And all you do is use the arrows. Again, you can select as many as you want, or use the double arrows to bring them all over. But they can do, comp detail and accounting tracker, but they can't do comp detail by comp type export. They can't do these over here, but they can over here. And I don't know if we can find one custom. They gave them all the custom. I'm trying to find a category here that has some on each side. Looks like they gave them quite a few of them here. But that's all it is. If I find another one with everything on one side, I'll show it to you. Yeah. So if I don't want them doing any of these are all custom ones, it looks like. Yeah, they are. They're all custom ones. Let's go sales and labor. All right. So if I don't want them doing my Aloha Daily Sales report, all I have to do is move it back over here on the left, and now they can't do that. All right. So that's how this works, and this will take most of the time as you're creating security roles. Reports will take the most time because there's so many of them. Also over here on the right, you can look at all the customized reports and do the same thing. Okay. No, I don't want to save it. I don't want to screw up that security class. But now we can see all the customized reports and determine which ones we want to give them as well. All right. So reports is really, that's going to be the most of anything that you do here in your security role because there's so many of them. But here's where the rubber meets the road now. If you look at your security rights, basically what we do on a security right, let's look at some of these we've been looking at today. If I come to user setup, let's go to look at our users. All right. What this says is I can allow them into user account setup, but control what they can do here. Now you'll see that on this demo access security right, they can't even do anything in there. All right. But I can say, hey, I'm going to let them add new users accounts. And that's all I want them to do. I don't want them modifying them. I don't want them deleting them. I don't want them to do anything except add new user account. All right. So now I've let them in this line item, but that's exactly what the security right does. It allows you in there, but limits what you can do in there. All right. So that you can see how powerful that can be. But the real thing is your applications. And what the applications are, these are the actual line items. All right. So here you'll see that company setup is not assigned to this group. All right. So when they log into the Aloha Insight website here, come to system setup, company setup is not even there. The first thing they'll see if they've got it is category setup. And it's not grayed out, it's gone. So you can see the power of the applications because now for a manager who's coming in here that I only want him to see reports and nothing else, I can take every one of these line items and every one of these headers away from him. And when he gets to Aloha Insight, I take all these away from him and just leave him with report viewer. That's the only thing he sees under the Aloha Insight header. So you can see how dynamic that is and how much you can control with these security classes. So that's really where the rubber meets the road. I did that last strictly because it's so dynamic and so powerful that we can control exactly what they see when they go in. All right, so just as kind of a review, we did the audit exceptions. We saw we put our own thresholds in there, and we could go to report viewer to report on those. We jumped down to company setup, spent most of our time there setting up all those company things with sales reporting and data management and everything else. Then we moved over into our stores, saw that we had a couple tabs there, but really only needed to configure one if we're not doing general ledger or payroll integration. Then we talked about our users, setting up our users, making sure that we put them in their home store or home region or home area, and then tied that in with the security class where we can limit them to their home store or their home region and now control everything about that website. So that is our webinar for today.